Chapter 51 Undersea Crisis. You are listening at novelfull.audio. 2 days on Chaika Island cost nearly 5 billion berries, practically draining Charlotte Bailey dry. He vowed never to return to that dump. Seeing his ship was coated, Charlotte waved a hand and said, "Sink it." The vessel slowly descended into the depths. As he looked at the surrounding seawater and marine life, Charlotte felt a mix of excitement and annoyance. Was this his first time actually seeing it? He'd only ever experienced something like this at an aquarium. He never expected to see it for real in the world of One Piece. Charlotte was momentarily fascinated by all the different kinds of fish swimming past the boat, oblivious to the fact that he was eating their cousins every day. The ship sank lower and lower, and the light began to fade. If it weren't for the glow ahead, Charlotte and his crew wouldn't have been able to see anything. Paul had told Charlotte that light came from the Eve tree, which illuminated all of Fishman Island. Murloc Island was a necessary stop to get across the red line. Charlotte didn't plan on staying there long, maybe a day at most. He certainly wasn't going to linger because of some Fishman Island princess. Everyone knew Charlotte wasn't like that. The ship sailed through the dark sea. Charlotte's mind was elsewhere. Whoosh! Suddenly, a sonar-like sound rang out. Charlotte snapped back to reality and remembered they were nearly 10,000 meters below the surface. He recalled that almost 80% of the ships passing through Fishman Island ended up wrecked on the seafloor. Most were destroyed by sea kings. If that sound had come from a sea king, it meant they were close. Thinking that, Charlotte activated his observation hockey. But the deep sea severely limited its range when the hockey spread out. Whoa! Charlotte gasped. He realized they were surrounded by sea kings. There were almost 30 within his range, but at least most of them were asleep. A few, however, were awake and swimming around. No way, this can't be happening. Using his hockey, Charlotte detected a whale-like sea king, nearly 100 meters long, slowly approaching. If this 100-meter sea king had surfaced, he'd be thrilled. They could have a feast. But at 10,000 meters below sea level, they might end up as the sea king's feast instead. Cold sweat dripped down Charlotte's forehead. The rest of the crew hadn't realized the danger. They were all standing at their posts, not really having a good time because there was nothing but darkness. If it wasn't for the lights on their ship, they wouldn't be able to see each other. The outside of the coating was pitch black. Whoosh! Another whale call echoed. This time, the sound was deafening, incredibly close. Panic washed over the crew, and they all looked toward Charlotte. At first, they assumed Charlotte was frowning because of the dark. Now they knew it was because of the sea kings surrounding their ship. Boss! Boss! What do we do? Paul stumbled toward Charlotte, his voice trembling. Shut up! Charlotte hissed. He was worried about talking in such a quiet place. What if the sea king heard them? Sure enough, another call came. Whoosh! Charlotte's hockey sensed the creature was within 50 meters of the ship. Holding his breath, Charlotte desperately tried to think of something. He tried to remember how the crew handled sea kings deep underwater back when he watched One Piece. With his hockey active, Charlotte's thoughts raced. His danger sense frantically warned him that the ship would be destroyed if he didn't act. Suddenly, he remembered a scene with Rayleigh. Conqueror's hockey. How could I forget Conqueror's hockey? Charlotte slammed his fist into his palm. Then, as the sea kings closed to within 10 meters, Charlotte released his hockey. An invisible wave of force erupted from Charlotte, washing over the sea kings. Shriek! A panicked cry echoed, and the 100-meter sea king thrashed its tail and fled. As it swam away, it cried again. The young sea king was terrified. It was like it was calling for its mommy, warning her of monsters. Thanks to his observation hockey, Charlotte watched the 100-meter sea king rapidly disappear from his range. The corners of Charlotte's mouth turned up in a slight smile. The crisis was over. The sense of danger in his mind was gone. Charlotte realized that his danger sense was different from Charlotte Katakuri's future sight, which was decades away. His version only manifested when danger was imminent. It was a bit like Peter Parker's Peter Tingle from Marvel. It wasn't the traditional form of future sight from the One Piece world, and it seemed that predicting the future could be improved by training. Maybe he could train it as well. It was interesting to note that Charlotte himself had never specifically trained his hockey. After it awakened on its own, his observation hockey simply grew stronger, without any effort. The same went for his Conqueror's Hockey. Once he gained control over it, its intensity increased, especially when he practiced Conqueror's Hockey in fusion. Charlotte had often wondered why his observation hockey was so powerful, but after much thought, he arrived at only one conclusion: when he'd crossed over, his soul and the soul of the original Charlotte merged, making him stronger than normal. Effectively, he possessed a double soul. That explained why Charlotte's observation hockey was so potent, and Charlotte was also very proficient. With Life Return, after learning the Navy's 6 powers, he mastered Life Return with ease. That had to be because of his double soul. It granted him exceptional control over his body. That was why Charlotte grew stronger so quickly. When he was 11 or 12, he only needed to work out every day and eat well. The mysterious world of swordsmanship came naturally to him. All of this was possible because his soul and spirit were twice as strong as those of ordinary people. It was like a plot from a previous life. Chapter 52, Fishman Island. You are listening at novelfull.audio. In the Fighting the Sky novels, Qi Wuhai is a time traveler whose soul is naturally more powerful than others. It's just a novel, but right now, it's the only explanation that makes sense. At 11, she broke through as a doja and became skilled at refining medicine, all thanks to her soul's strength. So, after Xia Luo learned about armament hockey, she focused almost exclusively on that, swordsmanship, and conqueror's hockey, never bothering with observation hockey. She just let it develop on its own. This is also why Charlotte's becomes so strong so quickly. She only trains her body in swordsmanship, trusting the other abilities to improve naturally without her direct effort. Charlotte's almost 18 now, less than 3 months away. Luffy became one of the 4 emperors at 19, and at 17, he was already a match for Zifa before he reached his peak. Not bad at all. Charlotte thought to herself, if Paul knew what Charlotte was thinking, he'd probably curse under his breath. A great swordsman under 20 is unheard of. Ever since he overheard Charlotte casually mention that she'd become a great swordsman while they were drinking on Chaika Island a couple of days ago, he'd been numb. He'd guessed she was around 20, which he already considered a high estimate, but he'd still underestimated her potential. Just then, as Charlotte was lost in thought. Captain. Fishman Island's ahead. Isaac's voice broke through. Charlotte stood at the bow, shaking off her thoughts. Looking at the brighter surroundings, she felt her spirits lift. Even though it's not the same as sunshine on land, it's still rare and welcome down here. No wonder the merfolk and fishmen want to go to the surface. The sun was bright, but still a bit dim. Staying here too long might get depressing, right? Charlotte thought. Looking around, the ship plunged through the bubble barrier around Fishman Island. Then, bang! The ship's coating shattered. As soon as the coating broke, the ship landed on the ground. Welcome, Pirate Charlotte. The Fishman Island guards, there to greet ships arriving from afar, recognized her immediately upon seeing the ship's bow. After all, as a notorious big-name pirate in the New World, how could they not know who she was? Quick! Tell the king. Sound the alarm. A pirate's invading. It's Pirate Charlotte. Woo-woo, the alarm blared, echoing across Fishman Island. These days, Charlotte's presence is like a future 4 emperors, sending everyone into a panic. Charlotte, who was initially excited, was instantly annoyed by the guards' reaction. She glared at the disorganized Fishman Island guards. Despite their nervousness, they were standing guard at the island's entrance, spears at the ready. You're not welcome here, Pirate Charlotte. Leave now. The lead guard stepped forward, looking at Charlotte fearfully, as if he expected to die any second. Hee. Boss. Looks like we're not exactly invited. Paul drew the saber at his waist, a bloodthirsty glint in his eye. Ever since he learned Charlotte had become a great swordsman, he'd felt an urgent need to get stronger, or he wouldn't be able to keep up with her. Seeing Paul draw his sword, the other pirates followed suit, pulling out their weapons and aiming them at the guards. The siren continued to wail. Teams of armored Fishman Island guards rushed over with spears. Arriving at the entrance and seeing the figure on the ship's bow. Blood Sword Lord Charlotte. The leader, a fishman who looked like a general, stared at Charlotte in disbelief. Charlotte rubbed her forehead. Great. Another guy who's scared of me. I just wanted to see Fishman Island. Why is it so difficult? Ha 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 ha. Charlotte, sitting on the bow, covered her forehead and laughed, her voice rising louder and louder. Ha 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 ha. Are you here to stop me? Charlotte looked coldly at the 1,000 or so Fishman Island guards facing her. The mermen were all very nervous when they heard Charlotte's hoarse laughter. The leading general stood up. Pirate Charlotte. We, Fishman Island, don't want to be your enemy. You should retreat. The general clearly mistook Charlotte for an invader. News traveled around the new world of countries being destroyed, invaded, and forced to surrender. Even living 10,000 meters underwater didn't mean they were out of the loop. Hearing the leader's words, Charlotte lowered her hand and looked up at the growing number of fishmen. Ha 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 ha. If you want to stop me, let's see if you can. Charlotte clearly wasn't in the mood to explain. And not everyone could stand up to her. Hearing her words, the Fishman general's heart sank. This was the thing he'd feared most. Looking at Charlotte's crazed expression, the general gave a hateful look. Fishman karate, 5,000 brick fist. The Fishman threw a karate strike, attacking Charlotte. Seeing the weak strength, Charlotte looked at it with disdain, not even in the mood to hide. Looking at the many fishmen, Charlotte smiled slightly when she remembered the scene where Luffy stunned 50,000 fishmen with his domineering arrogance on Fishman Island. Then his eyes were fixed, and an unrivaled momentum attacked the more than 1,000 Murloc guards in front of him with Charlotte. As the center, bang, bang, bang. As Charlotte's domineering look swept away, each and every Murloc fell to the ground and foamed at the mouth. Cut. The boss is like this again. The domineering look is really easy to use. Seeing Charlotte do this, Paul put the sword back into his waist, curled his lips and said enviously, this domineering look is worthy of the name of the miscellaneous fish cleaner. More than 1,000 Murlocs present fell to the ground one after another. Only the Murloc general was still trying to resist, but judging by his movements, he couldn't even stand firmly. This. Domineering and domineering. General Fishman Island looked at Charlotte in shock. He didn't expect that the very young big pirate in front of him had the aptitude of domineering look. Why would a person with such aptitude submit to others? Thinking of Charlotte's identity, the captain of the 8th Division of the Rocks Pirates. Old 8. Little Snake. Everyone. Countless Murloc guards who came from behind rushed over one after another, but when they stepped into the range of Charlotte's domineering look, they all foamed at the mouth and passed out, which made the rest of the Murlocs afraid to approach and rushed to the distance. Call out to someone you know. Chapter 53. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Still trying to stop me? Charlotte hopped off the ship's bow, strode up to the Murloc general, and looked up at him. Even though the Murloc towered at nearly 5 meters, Charlotte's imposing presence forced him into a half-kneel, bringing his height down to about 4 meters. It looked like Charlotte was gazing up, but everyone felt like she was looking down on the giant Murloc. Old man. I won't let anyone hurt Fishman Island. The Murloc general, struggling against Charlotte's immense pressure, stood his ground. What's your name, Murloc? Charlotte asked, a hint of interest in her voice as she looked at the towering blue figure. I am Shinkuin, general of Fishman Island. He roared. His pride as a general resonated in his voice. Shinkuin, huh? The name reminded Charlotte of Fisher Tiger, one of the 7 warlords of the sea. 30 years down the line, she scrutinized him. Blue skin, 2 prominent teeth jutting out from his mouth. Could this be Fisher Tiger's father? What a coincidence. Surprised, Charlotte released her imposing aura. Without that crushing pressure, Shinkuin pushed himself to his feet. Captain Charlotte. Fishman Island doesn't want to be enemies with the Rocks Pirates. I'm begging you, please don't harm us. Shinkuin dropped to his knees, pleading with her. Seeing him kneel, Charlotte felt a strange sense of déjà vu. Decades later, someone just like him would kneel in the same spot. She shook her head. Don't worry, I'm not interested in Fishman Island. I'm just passing through. I'll leave after a day of rest, so relax. Charlotte decided to stop intimidating them. It wasn't much fun anyway. Hearing this, Shen bowed his head to the ground, kowtowing. "Thank you, Captain Charlotte, for your generosity." That he was sincerely grateful. He knew that if Charlotte wanted to destroy them, nobody on Fishman Island could stop her. Against her overwhelming power, numbers meant nothing. "Take me to Fishman Island. It's my first time here." Charlotte gestured towards the entrance, ignoring the Murloc guards who lay on the ground, foaming at the mouth. Seeing Charlotte's interest, Shen scrambled to his feet. "Captain Charlotte, please, allow me to show you around Fishman Island." That he eagerly extended a hand. "All right," Charlotte accepted with a smile. She knew why Shen was being so attentive. He couldn't curb her curiosity, so he figured he'd be better off sticking close to her to prevent unnecessary trouble. A group of about 20 people followed Shen into Fishman Island. As they entered, Charlotte noticed many Murlocs and mermaids discreetly watching them, whispering amongst themselves. "Is that a human? Why doesn't he have a fish tail?" A little mermaid girl asked, puzzled. "Silly girl, he doesn't have a tail because he's a human." A young fishman replied to his daughter. Such comments were endless. Charlotte began to feel uncomfortable. She'd come to see the legendary mermaids and Murlocs, but now her group was the attraction. It wasn't a pleasant feeling. Being gawked at like an animal never felt good. Charlotte quickly lost interest in sightseeing. "Is there a tavern around here?" she asked Shen. "Ah. You want to sample the delicious wine of Fishman Island, I presume?" Shen looked up at Charlotte, who was about 7 feet tall. Today, Charlotte was around 7 feet tall, but he felt that he could still be 8 feet, probably about 8 feet. This is very in line with the height of the general in the One Piece world. "Yep," Charlotte nodded. "Excellent. This way, please." Shen gestured for Charlotte to follow him. As they walked, a frantic voice called out, "General Shen." General Shen, a Murloc with pale blue skin came running towards them, spear in hand. Shen recognized him as a guard from the Dragon Palace. The guard froze upon seeing Charlotte and was too terrified to speak. Frowning, Shen worried that the guard might offend Charlotte. "What is it? What's the matter?" Shen stepped forward, trying to avert any potential disaster, positioning himself between the guard and Charlotte. "General Shen, the prince, he wants to meet Mr. Charlotte." The guard glanced nervously between Charlotte and Shen. Shen's face fell. He pulled the guard aside and whispered urgently, "Nonsense. Tell the prince to stay away. Captain Charlotte is only here for a day. Tell him not to disturb her." Seeing Shen serious expression, the guard understood the gravity of the situation. "Yes, General. I'll go right away." The guard turned and dashed off. Shen turned back, forcing a smile. "Ha! Please excuse the prince. He's just a bit curious, so." Shen said sheepishly. "It's fine." Charlotte waved her hand dismissively. "By the way, what's your prince's name?" Charlotte asked casually. "Huh?" Shen was surprised by the question, but there was no reason to hide it. "His name is Prince Neptune, the king's only son and heir to the throne of the Dragon Palace." Shen made sure to remind Charlotte not to get any ideas. "Oh. Prince Neptune," Charlotte said, an idea forming in her mind. Wasn't that the future King Neptune, the big, round king? Charlotte only knew him for having a daughter, Princess Shirahoshi. Thinking of Neptune, Charlotte's mind raced. Shirahoshi was one of the 3 ancient weapons. She had the power to control sea kings. With oceans covering 70% of the planet, no one knew how many sea kings existed. It was a terrifying thought. But Shirahoshi wouldn't be born for decades. No need to rush. After Shirahoshi was born, he came over and accepted Shirahoshi as a righteous daughter. It is also very good to be Shirahoshi's godfather, but thinking about it now is still a bit far away. Seeing the flicker in Charlotte's eyes, Shen heart clenched. Was this guy planning something? Could he be after Prince Neptune? Shen grew tense. "Captain Charlotte. Shall we still go to the tavern?" Shen asked cautiously, trying to gauge Charlotte's reaction. Chapter 54 Wine from Murloc Island. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Let's go. Seriously, let's hit it. I want to try that awesome wine from Murloc Island, too. Charlotte was caught off guard by Shinkuen's words, but she bounced back fast. She headed out, already spotting the tavern. Shinkuen hurried after her, and Paul and the others trailed impatiently behind. Those guys were total winos, they could practically smell the booze. Bang. Charlotte kicked the door open. No idea who she learned that from, but Charlotte always kicked doors first, just to show she meant business. The sound of Charlotte kicking down the door immediately got everyone's attention. Most of the people who came to drink here were dudes. Humans? The Murloc who spotted Charlotte first sounded surprised. It's a human. All the Murlocs exclaimed after seeing Charlotte. It wasn't every day you saw a human on Fishman Island. I mean, this wasn't 30 or 70 years down the line, during the age of the pirates, when you could just sail straight through the world government's checkpoint to the New World after paying a small tax, instead of taking the death route to Fishman Island. The only ones crazy enough to brave the Fishman Island passage were pirates, outlaws, and slave traders, and none of them were exactly popular on Murloc Island, since they made a mess of things and kidnapped mermaids and strong Murlocs, which is why a lot of Murlocs and merfolk were hostile to humans. Get out of here, you damn human. This is Murloc Island. A clearly wasted Murloc chucked his wine bottle at Charlotte as soon as he saw her. Shinkuen's heart jumped into his throat. No way we're this unlucky, right? This is what happens when we get here. Bang. Charlotte casually snagged the empty bottle out of the air and glared at the Murloc who'd thrown it. Her eyes were like ice. Hold up, Captain Charlotte, I'm so sorry. What a mess. Shinkuen felt the temperature drop 10 degrees and practically teleported between the two groups, trying to smooth things over with Charlotte. Captain Charlotte, don't mind these guys, they're just drunk, Shinkuen said quickly. General Shinkuen, the Murlocs, who were dead drunk, suddenly sobered up when they saw who it was. Their eyes widened when they saw Shinkuen. Shinkuen breathed a sigh of relief knowing he was recognized. Get him out of here, now. Here, I'll pay for your drinks. Just leave, Shinkuen said to the group of Murlocs. But General Shinkuen, the Murlocs were confused. What was going on? It was just a human, right? Why was the general of Murloc Island bending over backwards for a human? But before they could finish, Shinkuen signaled to the guards behind him. The Murloc guards got the message and marched into the bar with their spears. General Shinkuen. General Shinkuen, the Murloc drunks were hauled out of the tavern by the guards. Shinkuen carefully took the empty wine bottle from Charlotte. Captain Charlotte, please, let me get you a drink. Enjoy. Taking the bottle from Charlotte, Shinkuen finally relaxed. Seeing she wasn't mad, hearing Shinkuen's words, Charlotte smiled. Alright, you guys. Drink till you drop. Charlotte plopped down at a clean table. Shinkuen winced. This was going to cost him, and the mermaid waiters and the boss were standing there. Clueless, Shinkuen hurried over to the elder mermaid and whispered a few words. The older mermaid snapped out of it and rushed to get the other waiters to serve wine. She knew what was what. She knew that a group like this being escorted by Shinkuen could not be taken lightly, and she didn't dare to be negligent. Charlotte watched the bottle of wine being served, opened it, and gulped it down. Her eyes widened as soon as the wine hit her tongue. Good stuff. Charlotte looked at the bottle and shouted. Keep them coming. Charlotte slammed the table. Hey! General Shinkuen, come have a drink with me. Charlotte pulled Shinkuen down to sit opposite her. Shinkuen winced, then braced himself. He picked up the wine, downed it in one gulp, and steeled himself. Ha 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 ha. Good man. Seeing Shinkuen drink it all, Charlotte complimented him. Heh heh. I might be getting old, but I can still hold my liquor. Shinkuen no longer held back and spoke with a loud smile. Ha 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 ha. Charlotte laughed and even Kuen joined in the laughter. Ha 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 ha. The two started to compete, bottle after bottle. Even the crew members following Charlotte and the Murloc guards were drinking. The previously quiet tavern became lively again, filled with male laughter. This caused many mermaids and Murlocs to stand outside and watch. Charlotte no longer knew the time when she drank it. When she woke up, she was lying in a group of men. There was also a faint fishy smell. Charlotte sat up, looking at a foot that was up on her body, quickly. "Shake off this foot." "What?" With a cry of pain, Charlotte looked. It turned out to be General Shirkuan. After a cry of pain, Jean Kun also woke up, shaking his dizzy head, only feeling dizzy for a while. "It hurts." Shirkuan, who didn't know whether it was a headache or a sore foot, stood up, looking at the crumbling hall around, thinking of the scene where he drank with Charlotte yesterday. He smiled wryly. "So? Have you been wronged by drinking with me, Charlotte?" Charlotte just saw Shirkuan's wry smile and asked dissatisfied. After hearing these words, Shirkuan looked up in the direction of the figure in a daze. Charlotte was already sitting at a clean table, looking at Shirkuan. "No, no, no. It's been a long time since I've drunk so much." Shirkuan thought that when he was young, he followed a group of friends from Murloc Street, and every time he had money, he would be like today. But since I became the general, it has never happened again, because he has to be the guard of Murloc Island. He can't think about it like before. Ha ha ha. Now that you're awake, come chat with me. Charlotte looked at Shirkuan and invited. The sun on Fishman Island was only dim now, and looking at the crew members sleeping like dead pigs around them, they probably wouldn't be able to wake up for a while. After hearing what Charlotte said, Shirkuan looked at Charlotte in surprise. He never expected that Charlotte, known as the blood sword hero by the world, would be so easy to talk to. Seeing Shirkuan looking at herself in surprise, Charlotte was amused. He was obviously a round older than himself, but now he looked at him in surprise like a child. Chapter 55 Surveillance. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Even though his current body is only 20, he's actually lived quite a bit longer than Shirkuan when you add up both his lifetimes. Ha! Surprised, huh? Bet you didn't expect a notorious pirate like me to strike up a conversation, did you? Charlotte grinned, looking up at Shirkuan, who towered over her. Shirkuan chuckled. "Heh, can't say I did. Didn't think you'd be the type to come chat." He didn't try to hide his surprise. "Ha! Come on, drink." Charlotte held up a bowl of wine. Shirkuan didn't hesitate, downing his own in one gulp. They drank until dawn. As people started to stir, they noticed Charlotte still sitting alone at the table. "Boss. You wanna head out today?" Paul approached cautiously, sensing her mood. Charlotte nodded. "Yeah, let's get back to the ship when everyone's up." Paul looked disappointed. Already? I was hoping to hang around Fishman Island for a couple more days. All the amazing sights and beautiful mermaid ladies were tempting. Charlotte frowned, seeing his face. "You wanna stay? Fine by me. Knock yourself out." Paul waved his hands frantically. "No way, boss. This ain't my scene. I'm chasing swordsman glory, not an easy life." He grinned. Charlotte shrugged. "Whatever. Hey, where'd the blue merman, Shirkuan, go?" Paul asked, noticing his absence. "He went home." "Why do you care?" Charlotte replied. She'd enjoyed their chat, thought Shirkuan was a fun guy, and he'd even picked up the tab. "He's gone." Paul was surprised. "He was keeping a close eye on us yesterday. Guess he changed his mind overnight." He didn't press it, seeing the boss wasn't interested. He turned to the groggy crew. "All right, up and at 'em. We're shoving off today, so shake it off." The crew of 20-odd men stumbled to their feet, looking towards Charlotte. Seeing them sober, Charlotte tossed back the last of her wine. "Let's go. Get on board." She headed towards the exit of Fishman Island. Using the island's special coral bubbles, they coated their ship again and began to navigate the underwater tunnel beneath the Red Line, heading for the first half of the Grand Line, soon to be known as Paradise by New World travelers. The ship passed over Fishman Island, through the Red Line's underwater passage. "Surface." The navigator called out, and the crew went to work, manipulating the ship to rise quickly. The ascent was twice as fast as the descent. Charlotte could see the surface light now. Whoosh. Bang! The ship burst from the sea, shattering its coating. Charlotte stood at the bow, taking in the view. She saw the Sabaody archipelago, a mangrove jungle. But Charlotte wasn't planning a stop there. She wanted to find the seven-star sword, and Sabaody was too close to Marineford and often had celestial dragons visiting. If she ran into one, she couldn't guarantee she wouldn't cut him down. She pulled out the log pose for Osaka Island that Shaki had given her and tossed it to the navigator. Osaka Island, here we come. Her voice cut through the crew's excited chatter about Sabaody. While they were disappointed, they held back, remembering the boss's earlier warning. The ship turned away from Sabaody, unseen. A Navy warship lurked in the shadows. Charlotte had been under surveillance since leaving Beehive Island. When she landed on Chica Island, the Navy had begun tracking her movements. Her visit to Fishman Island had caused major concern, with officers fearing she was acting on Rock's orders to attack the island. Fishman Island's strategic importance as a gateway to the New World couldn't be overstated. While Charlotte was inside Fishman Island, Navy HQ held an emergency meeting, considering sending Zeph to intervene. But intelligence from Fishman Island reported that Charlotte had left after a single night, spent drinking with the Merman General Shen Kuan. At Navy headquarters. "Tell me," Cyborg Kong asked, holding up the latest report, "what's Charlotte's game in the first half of the Grand Line?" Sengoku and Tsuru pored over the information, finding nothing conclusive. "Admiral Kong. Did you manage to get anything useful out of the Rocks pirates?" Sengoku asked. Kong shook his head. "Nothing concrete. All I know is Charlotte's trip seems linked to the informant Shaki. Our agents and the world government haven't turned up anything else, and we've lost a lot of operatives trying." Kong frowned, feeling the pressure. Dealing with the constant flow of information and trying to predict Charlotte's moves was exhausting. He'd be lost without Sengoku and Tsuru. Tsuru studied the report. "Best send a surveillance ship to keep an eye on her and report back." Kong frowned but nodded. "All right, assign a ship to monitor Charlotte's movements from a safe distance." The order was relayed to the Sabaody archipelago, where a rear admiral took command, his mission to shadow Charlotte's ship, leaving Sabaody. "Sir, we've located Charlotte's ship." A lookout called from his perch. Chapter 56-7 Water Capital. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Keep tabs on them from a distance. The Major General, all decked out in his justice coat, ordered, and so, the warship, cleverly disguised as a merchant vessel, trailed Charlotte's ship, a silent shadow on the shimmering sea. For 7 days, Charlotte's ship had been charting its course, carefully skirting the ominous Devil Island and heading straight for Water 7. "Boss. That ship's still back there, you know," Isaac reported, approaching Charlotte from behind. "Yeah, I noticed. It's probably just the Navy keeping an eye on us." "Don't sweat it," Charlotte replied with a dismissive wave. I. Isaac said, before scaling the mast to resume his lookout duty. Unlike Paul, who was always a bundle of nerves, Isaac was cool as a cucumber. He wasn't much of a talker, anyway, preferring to spend his time honing his swordsmanship, a trait Charlotte appreciated. "Boss. Water 7's up ahead. Should we drop anchor for a bit before heading to Aska Island?" Paul asked, joining Charlotte at the stern. Charlotte, perched on the bow, gazed out at the seemingly endless ocean, then turned his attention to the crew, a group of 20-odd sailors looking a little worse for wear. He pondered for a moment. Water 7 was practically next door to Eni's lobby, one of the world government's major strongholds. People didn't usually act out of line there, but Charlotte knew something others didn't. Eni's lobby wasn't all that, lacking any real heavy hitters, of course. That was 30 or 40 years down the line, and who knew what Eni's lobby was like today? Better safe than sorry. "All right, we'll take a day off, but keep it clean," Charlotte said, looking directly at Paul. Paul grinned at Charlotte's approval and rushed off to spread the good news. "Long live the boss." The crew roared, their weariness instantly replaced with excitement. Charlotte couldn't help but smile at their enthusiasm, closing his eyes to bask in the warm sunshine. Time seemed to slip away as Charlotte drifted off to sleep. "Boss! Boss! We're here!" Paul exclaimed, shaking Charlotte awake. Charlotte's jaw dropped as he took in the city sprawling before him, a breathtaking display of water and architecture. Seeing it in person was nothing like watching it on TV. As Charlotte's ship navigated into Water 7, the buildings lining the canals looked strangely familiar. Wasn't this just like Venice, the city he'd visited in a past life? The ship glided under a massive bridge, eventually docking at a bustling port. Charlotte was the first to disembark, immediately finding himself surrounded by a throng of eager locals. "Need a guide, sir? I'm practically giving tours away at 1,000 belly a day. Looking to commission a ship, sir. Martin shipyards can build anything under 200 meters. Need a brew? Cheap rates." Charlotte was instantly bombarded with offers of services. The energy of the crowd was infectious, and Charlotte found himself in good spirits. He waved his hand, signaling the crew to enjoy themselves, reminding them to meet back here in a day. "All right. Long live the boss." The crew cheered before rushing off to explore the city, pockets full of cash. Charlotte chuckled, renting a brew himself and setting off to explore Water 7. Meanwhile, a man hiding in the shadows spoke urgently into a den mushy. Moses. "This is Major General Wells. Charlotte and his pirate crew have entered Water 7. I repeat, Charlotte and his pirate crew have entered Water 7. At Navy headquarters, Fleet Admiral Kong was taken aback by the news. He'd been swamped with paperwork relating to the Navy's recruitment drive, and Wells's announcement had caught him off guard. After a moment, Kong composed himself. "Understood. Maintain surveillance from a distance. Do not engage Charlotte. I repeat, do not engage Charlotte." "Yes, Fleet Admiral Kong," Wells replied. "And stay safe." After issuing the instructions, Kong hung up. Wells adjusted his disguise after the call. "Spread out. Keep tabs on the other pirates and use signal flares if anything unusual happens." Wells instructed the 30-odd Marines in civilian clothes gathered before him. "Yes, Major General." They responded, saluting before dispersing to hunt for Charlotte's crew. Wells, in the meantime, rented his own brew from a local merchant, keeping Charlotte in his sights. Charlotte, of course, knew he was being followed, but paid it no mind. Killing the guy would be easy, but then the big guns would come, and that just wasn't worth it. Charlotte continued his leisurely tour, making no effort to conceal his identity. It seemed like no one recognized him, the notorious pirate with the hefty bounty. Was this some kind of pirate world face blindness? But he wasn't complaining. No one bothered him, not even the guy tailing him, who made no attempt to make an arrest. Was he waiting for backup? Charlotte doubted it. They'd been followed for 7 days. If backup was coming, they would have intercepted them before they even reached Water 7. No, this was purely surveillance, and that was fine by Charlotte. He explored the city's waterways, stopping to admire the sights and sample the local delicacies. Unbeknownst to him, his lavish spending had caught the attention of the local underworld. A lone traveler with no apparent companions, cruising around and flashing cash like it was nothing, such a person was prime target for Water 7's street thugs. Charlotte felt the envious gazes of several unsavory characters, but he didn't care. After finishing his snack, Charlotte disembarked. He strolled down a quiet alley, pretending to loosen his belt as if to relieve himself. The robbers saw their opportunity and exchanged knowing glances before following him into the alley. The clinking of weapons grew louder. Charlotte leaned against a wall, feigning fear as the thugs approached. "Why you? Who are you?" Charlotte stammered, staring wide-eyed at the 7 or 8 men wielding swords. "Heh. We're with the Raphael family. Hand over your belly if you want to live." The leader, a portly man with a menacing grin, said as he unsheathed his blade, his eyes sizing up Charlotte like a helpless lamb. What? Belly? I don't have any belly." Charlotte stammered, clutching his wallet protectively. The thug's eyes lit up at the sight of the wallet. "All right, tough guy, hand it over or else." Chapter 57 Scum. You are listening at novelfull.audio. A skinny guy with a knife stepped up, looking to snatch Charlotte's wallet, but when Charlotte saw him coming, her panic vanished, a smirk played on her lips as she twisted the knife from the skinny guy's wrist. Ouch! Charlotte didn't hold back, and the force she used snapped his wrist clean. Ha ha ha. You think you can rob me? Tough luck, pal. Charlotte grinned at the 8 remaining thugs. Wait, only 7. She had one pinned under her foot. Boss, help. Help me, the skinny guy, Vic, screamed. Charlotte's foot was planted firmly on his chest, like a vice. Hey! Let Vic go, the fat guy in charge, who had looked so confident, suddenly wavered. What was with this sudden change in the seemingly weak kid? Even though everything was going sideways, Fatty wasn't ready to lose control. 7 against 1, the odds were still in his favor. Go. Get her. Kill her. Seeing that Charlotte wasn't backing down, the fat guy ordered his crew to charge, knives raised. Charlotte just kept smiling at them as the 7 goons rushed her, grinning like maniacs. Charlotte still didn't flinch. Time to learn a lesson, kid. The fat guy raised his blade, aiming for Charlotte's gut, but instead of the expected schlick of steel meeting flesh, there was a loud clang. The lead thug stared in disbelief at the point where his knife had struck. A layer of black material had stopped it cold. Charlotte just kept smiling. You're a devil fruit user. That was the only explanation, the fat guy thought. How else could he not pierce her? In the first half of the Grand Line, not many people knew about hockey, and this guy clearly wasn't one of them. Charlotte simply smirked at the fat man, which only pissed him off more. Bastard, even if you are a devil fruit user, so what? Get her, guys. Hack her to pieces. Fatty waved his hand, and the remaining thugs swarmed, blades flashing. Charlotte smiled. Then, she activated her hockey, coating her entire body in a dark, purple-black aura. Clang, asterisk clang, clang, star. Asterisk dang, 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 star. The sound of blades bouncing off steel was deafening. Charlotte stood there, taking the blows. Huff. 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 The fat guy, winded from swinging his blade a few times, was the first to stop. The other goons, seeing their boss pause, quickly followed suit. They stared at Charlotte, shocked and terrified. They had just unloaded on her. Charlotte cracked her neck, surveying the 7 with a cruel smile. Since you're all done, it's my turn. Beneath her foot, Charlotte applied pressure, asterisk snap, star. The thugs looked on in horror. The skinny guy's sternum caved in, ribs shattered, blood gushing from his mouth. He stared at Charlotte, eyes wide with pain and terror, then, his head lolled to the side. Oh, what a shame. Well then, the rest of you can try to entertain me. Charlotte spread her arms, a sinister smile on her face. She sensed the darkness in these men's hearts, kidnapping and selling children, enslaving innocents, destroying families. They had done it all, and more. The fat guy, deep down, was a serious player. And he was someone Charlotte hadn't expected. The mayor of Water 7 was backing these thugs. Charlotte wasn't here to judge them, she didn't care about their mess, but if you crossed her, you were dead. Run. Finally, someone snapped out of it, and they all bolted, not even bothering to help their boss. Shave. Jeppo. Charlotte's toes blurred, and she launched a series of nearly invisible slashes that sliced through the air, cutting down the 6 fleeing thugs. She decided to cut them in half. People cut in half didn't die immediately, they would feel pain that was worse than death. The fat guy, seeing the people running faster than him get bisected, froze in terror. He spun around and fell to his knees before Charlotte. Spare me. I won't do it again. It was my fault. I'll give you all my treasures, just let me live. The fat man's bulk trembled as he kowtowed. Charlotte stepped down from the platform and walked slowly towards him. Thump, thump, thump. Each footstep echoed in the silence. The fat man looked up, saw Charlotte standing over him, and slammed his head back to the ground. Forgiveness? For $40 worth of Bailey you want me to let you go? Who do you think you are? Charlotte bent down, staring at the fat man, her voice dripping with mockery. What? You. You. How did you know? That the fat man looked at Charlotte in horror. How did she know he only had 40 Bailey to his name? Ha 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 ha. Charlotte didn't answer, instead she kicked the fat man in the face, not enough to kill him, just enough to knock out every single one of his teeth, and blood splattered on the ground. Woo-woo. The fat man curled up in agony, he reached out a trembling hand, begging for mercy, but Charlotte kicked his arm, shattering the bone. Don't touch me. You're disgusting. Charlotte spat, then she picked up the discarded knife, and with a flash of steel. Aya. Charlotte sliced off the fat man's limbs, leaving him a helpless torso. I won't kill you. I'll leave you to live in fear for the rest of your life. Charlotte dropped the blade, turned, and walked out of the alley. Only 7 corpses and the whimpers of one remained. Clap, clap. After Charlotte had left the alley, there was a burst of applause behind Charlotte. Just as expected from a big pirate with a bounty of 50 million, brutal. Chapter 58 The Lonely Red by Patrick Redfield, The Red Earl. You are listening at novelfull.audio. A guy in a purple shirt, blood-red pants, and a wide red cape stepped out, holding an umbrella. He was a noble-looking young man with striking red eyebrows. Applause erupts. Star. Yo. Charlotte jumped, startled by the voice. She whirled around, immediately on guard. She was visibly surprised when she saw who it was. The visitor was equally taken aback by Charlotte's reaction. What's this? Mr. Charlotte knows me. The young man grinned. He couldn't believe Charlotte, a big-shot pirate in the New World, would recognize him, a small-time pirate who hadn't even made it that far. Charlotte, hearing this, calmed down a bit, though still eyed him warily, studying him from head to toe. She knew exactly who he was, Lonely Red Patrick Redfield, the Red Count. A powerhouse destined to shake the seas in a few years, as famous as Roger, the Golden Lion, and Whitebeard, a guy who could stand toe-to-toe with the other 3 great pirate crews, all by himself. She never expected to run into him here. Then again, maybe it made sense. In her past life, she remembered Patrick Redfield admired the Rumbar pirates from a young age, and that was his reason for becoming a pirate. The Rumbar pirates never made it to the New World, wiped out in the Triangle by some kind of virus. Only Brooke survived thanks to the revive fruit, and he's still drifting around in that cursed triangle. That place was always shrouded in fog, and Charlotte was too wary to venture in easily. Seeing Charlotte just staring him up and down without a word, Ryder wondered if she really knew him. He wasn't about to just stand there awkwardly. Mr. Charlotte. Ryder prompted. Charlotte snapped out of it, then, she stared back at him, face serious. I'll be damned. Didn't think there were monsters like you kicking around in the first half of the Grand Line. Charlotte said, faking surprise. Ryder chuckled at that. Allow me to introduce myself, Red Count Patrick Redfield. Current bounty, 100 berries. He pulled a wanted poster out of his clothes and flashed it at Charlotte, but Charlotte, after hearing the Red Count's name, was taken aback. She ignored the poster, thinking, didn't the story say Patrick Redfield was a total loner? Never interacted with people. Why is he introducing himself? Ryder was puzzled by Charlotte's reaction, thinking maybe she was impressed by his bounty. He smiled softly and tucked the poster away. I may be a pirate, but I don't go around killing innocent people. So far, I've only been rewarded for taking out a few small fry. They don't know my true strength. Charlotte nodded subconsciously. Right. So, what brings Mr. Red Count here? Just passing through and saying hello. Charlotte frowned, questioning the Red Count. The Red Count laughed, sizing up Charlotte. I want to test my strength against you, see where I stand. Charlotte, hearing his challenge, knew things were about to get real. Fine. Pick a deserted island, and let's throw down. She never backed down from a challenge, especially one at her level. It only made Charlotte more pumped. Okay. I know of an uninhabited island nearby. Let's head there. The Red Count pointed in a certain direction with his umbrella. Charlotte immediately scanned the area with her observation hockey. Sensing Charlotte's hockey, he looked at her in surprise. He didn't realize her observation hockey was so strong. From what he knew, Charlotte was a swordsman, but this told him that she was much more. Otherwise, he wouldn't have come to challenge her. Charlotte's observation hockey quickly located a deserted island about the size of 10 football fields in that direction. Actually, it was more like a beach. Charlotte nodded. Let's go, then. Charlotte hopped into her rented blue, Ryder leaped onto blue too, and the two sailed toward the deserted beach together. Meanwhile, the rear admiral who had been tailing Charlotte followed in secret. Charlotte and Ryder both noticed. Mr. Charlotte, got a tail back there. Looks like he's heading your way. Patrick Redfield sailed alongside Charlotte, calling out to her. Charlotte grinned and waved it off. Ha! Don't sweat it. That's just the Navy, keeping an eye on me. After all, I'm a pretty big pirate, and I'm here in the first half of the Grand Line. If the Navy didn't react, I'd think they were blind. The Red Count was taken aback at Charlotte's nonchalant attitude, even knowing the Navy was watching her. You're not worried, the Red Count asked. Charlotte waved her hand dismissively. Worried about what? The only ones in the Navy I'm worried about are Admiral Kong, Vice Admiral Garp, Vice Admiral Sengoku, and Vice Admiral Zifa. Everyone else at headquarters is small fries. Charlotte declared confidently. Patrick Redfield was speechless. It was true. For monsters like them, numbers didn't matter. Only top-tier power could take them down. Really? But according to last month's news, you and Zifa shocked the world. You almost triggered an all-out war between the Rocks pirates and the Navy. And word on the street is you lost. Ryder looked at Charlotte with a playful grin. Charlotte bristled at that. That's bull. It was a draw, plain and simple. I fought Zifa for 3 days and nights, and we both passed out at the same time. The Navy forced that news hack Morgans to report it that way to save face. Seeing Charlotte so riled up, Ryder laughed inwardly. But he could tell she was telling the truth. That expression was hard to fake. He realized that he was unable to read anything in Charlotte's mind, which was strange, because he had an innate domineering nature. He could sense people's hearts because of his natural aura. It was even stronger than Charlotte's mind-reading ability. However, he couldn't control his ability to read minds. He was always feeling the hearts of people in the world, and most people's hearts were dark, so he liked to go alone and go to sea alone. But when he met Charlotte today, he couldn't perceive any inner thoughts, which made him more interested in Charlotte. Chapter 59 Hedging. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Moses. This is Major General Wells. Is that General Steelbone I'm talking to? I've spotted something weird. Big-time pirate Charlotte is meeting with a pirate I don't recognize. Turns out to be Red Earl Patrick Redfield. I haven't heard that name in years, not since the first half of the Grand Line. The two of them are headed for a deserted island. No telling what they're cooking up. Cyborg Sora, who was going through paperwork with Sengoku and Crane, answered the Den Mushi and frowned. He glanced at Lieutenant General Crane. She was listening in too. The Red Earl. Crane's brow furrowed. She pulled a bounty poster from a file. It was the Red Earl's. 1 million berries. What's Charlotte up to? Meeting with him. Cyborg Kong took the poster, looking puzzled. Warring States and Crane shook their heads. Major General Wells, continue to monitor, but your safety comes first, Cyborg Kong said into the Den Mushi. Wells, sitting on the marine ship, gave a wry chuckle. Cyborg General, I think they know I'm here, but they're not making a move. Wells' strained voice came through the Den Mushi. Cyborg Kong was taken aback. They know. When did they figure it out? Cyborg Sora asked. Just now. The Red Earl, the one in the purple clothes, spotted me, but they seem to be ignoring me. Wells reported. Okay, keep your distance. Observe, and pull back if things get hairy. I'll stay in contact, Cyborg Kong replied. Roger that. Wells said. Charlotte and the Red Earl jumped onto the beach of the deserted island after their ship landed. Charlotte scanned the area to see if anyone was around. The Red Earl watched her with interest. A big-shot pirate with a 5 billion berry bounty worries about civilians being on an island. Charlotte scratched the back of her head, looking confused. Ha! Don't get me wrong, I never kill civilians on purpose. Goes against my code. Charlotte declared. Oh. And what code would that be? The Red Earl asked, a little thrown off by Charlotte's thought process. My code. Charlotte paused. Simple, I don't start fights, but I always finish them. Mess with me, and you'll regret it 100 times over. That's my code. Charlotte said firmly. The Red Earl was caught off guard. Charlotte's code wasn't what he expected. Really? Impressive. The Red Earl said, trying to hide his shock. Charlotte's code wasn't so different from his. But he didn't care about civilians like Charlotte did. Enough chit-chat, let's get to the fight. The Red Earl raised his umbrella, pointing it at Charlotte. Ha 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 ha. All right. Let's do this. Charlotte drew her long sword, and a shocking wave of energy radiated from her. Conqueror's Haki slammed into the Red Earl. The Red Earl couldn't help admiring the sheer power. Impressive. But I'm not slacking off either. The Red Earl planted his umbrella on the ground, his eyes focused. His Conqueror's Haki erupted, showing Charlotte his strength. Not bad. Charlotte remarked, impressed by the Red Earl's display. The Major General watching from the sea was stunned by the Haki. Holy crap. Conqueror's Haki. Wells exclaimed. Cyborg Kong heard Wells' outburst. Wells, what's going on? What Haki? Cyborg Sora demanded. Wells grabbed the Den Mushi. General Cyborg, Charlotte and the Red Earl started fighting on the island, and they both unleashed Conqueror's Haki. The sky is being torn apart. Wells reported. The people in the Navy headquarters were stunned. A pirate with a bounty of 100 million berries had Conqueror's Haki? How could their intel be so wrong? After hearing the sky is cracked, Kong stared at the Den Mushi in disbelief. Only those who mastered Conqueror's Haki could change the sky. Such a powerful person shouldn't have a bounty of just 100 million. Major General Wells, are you sure about what you said? Cyborg Sora asked again. Wells, staring at the sky, mumbled an agreement. The sky was split in two, and the sea was churning from the force of the Haki. Cyborg Kong still struggled to believe it, but he remembered he told Wells to bring a video Den Mushi. Major General Wells, activate the video Den Mushi and point it towards the fight. Cyborg Kong yelled, hearing Kong's words. Warring States and Crane perked up, realizing the value of visual confirmation. Seeing is believing. Major General Wells quickly pulled out the video Den Mushi. Wells turned it on. Steelbone Kong, along with Sengoku and Crane, watched from the general's office. Everyone held their breath as the image appeared. Wells framed the video perfectly. It showed both Charlotte and the Red Earl, as well as the impact on the sky. Charlotte pointed her sword at the ground. The Red Earl leaned on his umbrella, standing 10 meters away. The two were motionless, but their Haki was intense. Charlotte's dark red Haki clashed with the Red Earl's purple-red Haki. There's no clear advantage. Where did this Red Earl come from? Warring States exclaimed, shocked by the display. He himself had Conqueror's Haki, and he knew it wasn't easy to reach this level. Chapter 60 Favorite. You are listening at novelfull.audio. After hearing Sengoku's report, Crane silently left the conference room. As the Navy's chief of staff, she felt responsible for the situation. A pirate, able to go toe-to-toe with Charlotte, had emerged right under their noses. The pressure was immense. Anyone capable of battling Charlotte should have a bounty of at least several 100 million berries, but this guy? Such a powerful figure only had a 100 million berry bounty. It felt like a slap in the face to the Navy. Seeing Crane's silent departure, Steelbone Kong didn't intervene. He knew she was going to investigate. Instead of just sitting there, it was better to get a jump on identifying the Red Earl. Steelbone Kong and Sengoku studied the images. Although the distance was considerable and the picture somewhat blurry, it was enough. After a lengthy display of Haki clashing, the Red Earl grinned. Perfect. He was becoming increasingly eager for the next round. He planted his umbrella in the sand and approached Charlotte barehanded. Seeing this, Charlotte understood immediately. She also stuck her sword in the beach and advanced, unarmed. When they were about 15 feet apart, both Charlotte and the Red Earl yelled simultaneously. They spread their arms and charged, fists raised, black armament hockey condensed around each fist, bang. The collision of fists created a massive shockwave, rattling the beach and sending sand flying. Neither warrior yielded an inch. Sensing the other's strength, they grinned at the same time. They drew back their hands, and their fists collided again. Ha ha ha! Both roared with laughter, satisfied with the other's power and thrilled to have found a worthy sparring partner. Bang! 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 Without pause, they stood their ground and traded blows. Their speed intensified, a flurry of fists too fast to follow. The only distinguishing feature was the color of their armament hockey, red-black for Charlotte, purple-black for the Red Earl. After a rapid exchange, the Red Earl stumbled back a step under the force of Charlotte's all-out assault, breaking the deadlock. The Red Earl felt a stinging sensation in his fist and frowned slightly. He couldn't understand why he felt pain, despite using armament hockey for defense. Charlotte, having gained the upper hand, noticed the Red Earl's puzzled expression and explained gleefully. I used an advanced armament hockey technique in that last attack, one that damages the enemy from the inside. It's called Ryuo. It's a training method from Wano country. Pretty powerful, huh? Charlotte didn't see any reason to keep it secret. In fact, he wanted everyone to know, just to make things more interesting. The Red Earl, acknowledging the lingering pain in his arm, nodded after Charlotte's explanation. Impressive. That kind of surprise attack could really throw you off. The Red Earl lowered his arms, smiling at Charlotte. Ha 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 ha. You bet. You should swing by the New World sometime. It's boring to stay in the first half of the Grand Line forever. Charlotte suggested. The Red Earl listened and nodded with a smile. I will. After this fight, I'm planning to head to the New World and challenge some strong fighters. Charlotte was pleased that the Red Earl was taking his advice. This was the Red Earl, after all. The Lone Red. That such a solitary and proud figure would consider his opinion was worth celebrating. Ha ha ha. The New World is full of monsters, including my crewmates like Whitebeard Edward Newgate and Golden Lion Shiki. Charlotte Lin Lin is another top powerhouse. You're guaranteed to get stronger if you challenge them. Hearing what Charlotte said, the Red Earl frowned. Are they really that strong? The Red Earl had heard of them, but had never fought them and didn't know much about their real strength. Strong. Terrifyingly strong. They're all monsters. I might not be able to beat them right now. Of course, that's just temporary. I'm only 20 years old. Once my body is fully developed, I won't be afraid of anyone. Charlotte proclaimed with pride and confidence. After hearing what Charlotte said, the Red Earl smiled. What about your captain? Hearing that Charlotte only mentioned those cadres but not the captain, the Red Earl asked curiously, and when Captain Rox was mentioned, Charlotte fell silent. Take my word for it, don't challenge Rox. At least not until you've reached your peak in the next few years. That's all I'm going to say. He's incredibly powerful. So powerful that the world government wouldn't dare to start a war easily. Seeing Charlotte's serious expression, the Red Earl nodded solemnly, but Charlotte caught the fighting spirit in his eyes. He didn't bother trying to dissuade him, instead changing the subject. Of course, the New World isn't just about our Rox pirates. There's another powerful pirate crew, not quite as strong as ours, but still first-rate, the Roger Pirates. Captain Roger, Vice Captain Rayleigh, and Fighter Jabba are all well-known powerhouses. Charlotte explained to the Red Earl. Roger Pirates. The Red Earl had obviously heard of them, but they seemed to be constantly hounded by a Navy headquarters Vice Admiral, who was a force to be reckoned with himself. Seeing the disdain in the Red Earl's eyes, Charlotte quickly added, don't underestimate the Roger Pirates. None of them are devil fruit users. They rely entirely on physical strength and swordsmanship. Their captain and vice-captain are powerful swordsmen and veteran great swordsmen. Combatant Jabba is also a great swordsman, but he uses an axe, and his strength starts to be very strong. Charlotte's earnest explanation prompted the Red Earl to nod, though the disdain in his eyes remained. But that was to be expected. The lone Red wasn't easily intimidated. Charlotte had said his piece. Whether the Red Earl listened was up to him. The reason Charlotte had shared so much was simply because he liked the Red Earl. The Red Earl, in turn, was developing a good impression of Charlotte. After all, he never had to guess what Charlotte was thinking. This kind of straightforward conversation was a novel and strangely comforting experience for the Red Earl. I've told you everything you need to know about the new world. Now, let's get back to our competition. Charlotte smoothly pulled his long sword from the sand.